Right. We're going to talk about the Vatican rat lines and involved with Odessa. And it's important that we talk about the Knights of Malta, which is really the organization which is most closely associated from the Roman Catholic Church's point of view with the rat lines. And kind of give a little rundown. I know we've talked about them some in this series already. But this is from an article by Constantine, Shattering the Myths. And he's talking about the Knights of Malta. And he says, the order has been proven to be linked with the rat run, the post-World War II escape route used by high-ranking Nazis and death camp scientists from defeated Germany to the Americas. Sovereign Knight of Malta passports were issued with false identities, which allowed escape from prosecution for war crimes. Perversely, after the war, the order's highest decoration, the Grand Cross of Merit, was awarded to General Reinhard Gehlen, Hitler's head of intelligence. The Brotherhood's strong Catholic roots made the modern Knights fervently anti-communist. The order has been largely responsible for the construction of the CIA and many of its global covert operations. The founding fathers of the CIA, William Wild Bill Donovan and Alan Dulles, were Knights, as were most other heads of the CIA, including Ronald Reagan's director, William Casey. Casey gave Pope John Paul II unprecedented access to CIA intelligence, including spy satellites and agents. The Knights of Malta's key spheres of influence are Africa and Latin America, and include many dictators such as mass murderer General Pinochet in their ranks. Membership in Latin America includes Masonic P2 fascists and many surviving Nazi players who were directly responsible for the formation of the modern neo-Nazi movement. Knight and Nazi escapee Otto Scarface Skorzeny, who had led a commando raid on the Cathar region of France in search of occult artifacts, including a Holy Grail, played a major role in the Vatican's rat run. I think in the next episode we'll talk about Skorzeny in detail. Goes on to say, conveniently for Nazi members who did not escape, Knight William Donovan served as chief aide to the American prosecutor at the post-war Nuremberg trials after handing over the reins of the OSS CIA to fellow Knight Alan Dulles. So that's pretty convenient for the Nazis to have William Donovan as the chief aide to the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg, which means that they got a much better deal than they might have gotten otherwise.
Let me ask you, did you ever come across any information that some of the, I don't know, I'm going to call them legitimate prosecutors in the United States? I mean, I keep thinking back to that movie, with Spencer Tracy.
Right.
Not knowing how much of that was propaganda. But did you ever come across anything where any of the prosecutors were kind of like, what's going on here?
I haven't, I really don't have any great details on that. But I know that that one of the British prosecutors apparently was a little upset at the way things went, and he didn't think that things were being done fairly and that the Nazis were getting off easy. And I think that because he was one of those guys who wasn't in on the circle, he wasn't in the in crowd. And I think there's also was an American prosecutor. I'll look into that. Yeah, that's interesting.
But aren't we agreed? Didn't you I also speak about this? You're the one that mentioned it, and I said absolutely. That took a look at the behavior during the trials of which was it? Was it Hess?
Yeah, Hess. What about Hess?
Well, wasn't it Hess who seemed a little bit affable and cocky, like nothing's going to happen to me?
No, Goering.
It was Goering. Thank you.
Yeah, Goering more or less took over the procedure. He was taking things over. I mean, he was a very dynamic personality. That's how he got to be where he was. And he was kind of turning things around on the Allied prosecution. And then they brought in some films showing the concentration camps, and that started to break him down, and they really went for the throat there.
All right, Hess was being sat on in Great Britain, is that correct?
Well, no, he was at the trials.
Wait a minute, okay.
Nobody was sure if he was really lucid or not. He seemed to be completely mentally ill, but nobody's really sure about that period.
All right, wait a minute. Hess is the one that went over to England, right?
Yeah, he went over to England to try to supposedly to try to negotiate a separate peace with the British.
And they sat on him in Spandau, didn't they,
right,
for quite some time? All right.
Yeah.
Is he the gentleman with the dark hair, of decent stature? Kind of almost like like a coal-piled beard or something like that, rough stubble, 5 o'clock shadow type of guy.
I think that would describe him pretty well.
All right, no, I think it was he that was yucking it up in the box with the other guys.
No, actually, it was Goering.
It was Goering. Oh.
Yeah, Goering.
Oh,
Goering,
okay.
Goering had lost quite a bit of weight, so he didn't look like they had forced him to lose weight. They wouldn't allow him to, eat a large amount. They also took the drugs away from him. He was a heavy drug addict, including, I think, morphine and maybe even heroin. I'm not sure if he had heroin, but he was a morphine addict, and he also was on some kind of downer pills. But once that he had been in prison for a while before the trial, they had forced him to go on a diet, and they had kind of cleaned him up, and he kind of came out of his shell and really started kind of taking over the proceedings.
Okay.
He kind of rode herd on the rest of the guys in the group, and wouldn't allow them to break down. But it was Goering. Hess kind of sat there like he was out of it. I mean, he was just like,
well, that's what happens when you have a lobotomy.
Yeah.
But don't you wonder that
Winston Churchill went in there one day with a surgeon.
Right.
Who knows?
But don't you wonder sometimes too, if Hess was legitimate and realized this whole thing is like crazy and rigged, and actually went over and tried to talk sense, and it was like, I mean, that's a take I have. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't think that guy.
I think maybe Hess got the idea that it was a failed experiment, and it wasn't going to work out. And he thought, well, we have friends over in Britain. I'll go talk to them, and we'll arrange a separate peace, and then we'll just go after the Russians,
And then he finds out
that may have been what happened. I'm not sure,
But that's a good point. I mean, what happens if he goes over with good intentions and realizes that the deal is rigged, that the Brits are in on it too, along with the Germans, and guess what? This is going to happen. Sorry, Hess, but that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Good point. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Prior to working for the OSS, he headed, we're talking about Alan Dulles, he headed the OSS station in Switzerland during the war. Alan Dulles and his law partner, John Foster, his brother, had served as business managers and lawyers to John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil. They personally brokered the partnership between Standard Oil and IG Farben Chemical Corporation. IG Farben not only produced gasoline for the Nazi war machine, it manufactured Zyklon B. I might mention that they manufactured gasoline from coal. They invented the process, and there was a Standard Oil and IG Farben agreement in the 1920s where they basically became the same corporation. It manufactured Zyklon B, used slave labor before and during the war, including their huge petrochemical factory adjacent to Auschwitz death camp. They owned Bayer Pharmaceuticals, which, according to a current lawsuit, was directly involved in Dr. Joseph Mengele's horrific Auschwitz experiments, and was spared from Allied bombings due to its Rockefeller interest. This is kind of the catch-22 thing. Leading wartime journalist George Seldes attempted to reveal this unholy alliance through his newspaper articles, but was rarely published at the time, and efforts were made to kill him. Joseph Heller's satirical novel Catch-22 made light of the insanity with his "We agreed to bomb our own bases in return for the Nazis buying our chocolate-covered cotton."
There you go.
I always liked that one. Anyway, as the Cold War intensified, Knight of Malta Joseph H. Redinger, acting on behalf of the Vatican and the Priory of Sion, forged ties with the European Council of Princes, which is the respectable name for the Dragon Court. That's another story. The CIA and Britain's MI6 to create the New World Order think tank, the Bilderberg Group, of which Henry Kissinger is a permanent member. His first chairman was Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who held that position for the next 22 years, until a financial scandal forced him to resign. His daughter, Queen Beatrix, attended the year 2000 meeting, as did ample other European aristocratic players. The undemocratic Bilderberg Group continues to play a major part in international affairs and remains closed to public scrutiny and participation. I might also add that Prince Bernhard was a member of the SS, an honorary member of the SS himself. Documents show that New York's Cardinal Francis Spellman was directly involved in the right-wing military coup of Guatemala. which led to the murder of thousands and of which the CIA has acknowledged complicity. He has also been linked to neo-Nazi group P2 and the Mafia by his involvement with P2 member Archbishop Paul Marcinkus of Chicago, former head of the Vatican Bank, who was under suspicion by Italian authorities for the untimely death of Pope John Paul I. And we go back to the deal with the Godfather III there.
Yeah, which goes through this, yeah.
Yeah. Cardinal Spellman was not only an old friend of CIA creator Wild Bill Donovan, who previously had a law firm in New York, but was the actual head of the American Knights of Malta through the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and was responsible for vast sums of money raised from its members who have to pay thousands annually to remain in the order. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta is directly allied with the International Freemasonry, from where they recruit their new elite brethren. Hence, the Knights of Malta and the Knights Templar are the Rosicrucian upper degrees of Freemasonry. Now, that's speculation, that's an opinion, but I think it could very well be the case. Ironically, in recent years, a belief in the Catholic faith has not been an essential prerequisite for potential members who have the right connections. Non-aristocratic parties can now be initiated by the magistral grace of the Grand Master, although not in Britain, Germany, and other European countries with a strong tradition of nobility. However, this has allowed many Americans to join, and an order of merit is bestowed upon those who have outstandingly served the Knights or their works. Past Presidents Ronald Reagan and George Bush are such honorary initiates. That's George Bush the first. And Reagan was the toast of an extravagant dinner held by the order in 1989. With more than 11,000 knights worldwide, the Grand Master and Sovereign Council remain based in Rome. Their goal of political feudalism is clearly seen in the actions of Prince Hans Adam II, the Habsburg ruling monarch of Liechtenstein and a prominent Knight of Malta and a member of the Vatican's Opus Dei, who in October 1999 was reprimanded by the European Court of Human Rights for claiming he had final constitutional authority over his country's Supreme Court. The insignia of the Knights of Malta is the unusual Cross of Malta. That was the original emblem of the Knights Templar before being forced to adopt the Latin cross following the Inquisition.
And then it winds up as the Klan's cross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Occult initiates discovered that the Cross of Malta is a cryptogram for the goat of Mendes, the occult idol Baphomet, as is the inverted pentagram or five-pointed star that represents the goat's beards and horn. This is a symbol of ruling matter and spirit by the will and the controlled magical direction of sexual energies. Past Grand Masters of the Knights of Malta include Manuel de Fonseca, are known to have been initiates of the Templar tradition, and according to the Dragon Court's current sovereign Grand Master, Prince Nicholas de Vere von Drakenberg, who is a direct descendant of the originator of the Knights Templar, Godefroy de Bouillon, the Templars were a, quote, satanic order whose rituals included infanticide, sodomy, and witchcraft. Well, I hope that's not going on at the local lodge down the street. But, sorry to make light of that. That's pretty scary.
I
but
know it is, yes.
It kind of gives you an idea of what was going on with the Vatican rat lines. And having said all that, I'll go back to one of my tried and true sources here, John Loftus, Mark Ahrens, in their book Unholy Trinity. Those who did rescue the mass murderers from the hands of justice were not Perón, the Argentine dictator, and his secret police, but the Roman Catholic Church and its emissaries. It was the Roman Catholic Church which, through its priests, churches, monasteries, and forged Vatican passports, managed to foil the post-war hunt for Nazi war criminals. Nor was the Church's rescue operation inconsistent with the policy it had pursued throughout the Nazi era. Henry du Lubac, a Jesuit theologian, filed a report in 1944, well before the end of the war, on the collaboration of the Roman Catholic Church with the pro-Nazi Vichy French government. Hidden until this month, the report condemns that du Lubac caused the moral and spiritual abdication of Roman Catholic bishops under the Nazis. For decades, French cardinals, monks, and nuns had helped one of France's worst war criminals, Paul Touvier escaped justice. It is difficult to imagine that it was possible in the monolithic Roman Catholic Church for so many to act so uniformly for so long without the knowledge and approval of the highest levels of the Vatican. Israelis have found it difficult to understand why the Vatican has refused to recognize the State of Israel. Adolf Eichmann in February, Adolf Eichmann was issued a Vatican visa and passport in the name of Riccardo Clement, dated 14 July 1950, by Franciscan monks in a Catholic monastery in Italy, giving him free passage to Argentina. Now, I saw that statement backed up by a documentary that I saw on the History Channel recently, where they were tracking the steps of Eichmann and several other war criminals, and Bormann for that matter. And they went to, I believe it was Genoa, Italy, and they showed the church where the priest had presided, who had fixed the passport for him. And they tried to, the guy was Yuki Goni, who is an Argentine anti-Nazi, who's done a lot of research and tried to, chase the trail of some of these Nazi war criminals. And he pointed out how he had been kind of stymied at every turn trying to get more information on how this passport was issued. And it just kind of, at the end, he was saying, well, this just shows you what's going on and how these things are hidden and how they are shut down whenever you try to investigate. And I will now go to Peter Lebenda's Unholy Alliance and talk about the Ratlines there. And in particular, probably most prominent, or one of the two most prominent men in the Ratlines, was Bishop Alois Hudal. He starts off talking about the attitude of the Catholic Church toward the Nazis, but there were those Catholic officials who found themselves in secret agreement with much of the Nazi platform, particularly where the potential threat of Russian communism was concerned. Pope Pius XII, for example, was notoriously silent regarding the fate of the Jews and was eager to avoid any confrontation with the Nazis. He jumped to praise the Fuhrer, however, when the latter moved against godless communists in the East. Like many of his contemporaries, he figured the Allies were shooting in the wrong direction. It was this attitude that directly or indirectly permitted many war criminals who committed ghastly crimes against humanity to escape forever the long reach of the Nuremberg Tribunal, and even in some cases to find themselves working in official capacities for the Allied intelligence services in their Cold War against the Soviet Union. It would be Bishop Alois Hudal who would carry the fascist flag for the Vatican. Born in Austria on May 31st, 1885, he was ordained a Catholic priest in 1908. The parallels between his career and that of Lance von Liebenfels are striking. In the first place, both were Austrians born within 11 years of each other. Von Liebenfels was born on July 19, 1874, in Vienna, both entering the Catholic priesthood, with von Liebenfels entering the Cistercian novitiate in July of 1893 and taking his vows in September 1897, 11 years before Alois Hudal. And I might add that we saw that Liebenfels was thrown out of the Cistercian order for sexual activities, and you can figure out what those would be since it's an all-male activity there. Father Alois Hudal himself became something of an Armanist and fellow traveler, just as von Liebenfels became the head of his own order of knights, the Order of the New Templars. Hudal became Procurator General of the Order of German Knights, which is a Catholic institution. On May 1st, 1933, in honor of the pagan holiday approved by the Nazis and known as Walpurgis, or Beltane to the Celts, celebrated with the famous Witches' Sabbath at midnight, Father, now Bishop Hudal, presided over a meeting in Rome, attended by over 700 members of the German expatriate colony there, including many church officials, Nazis and Nazi leaders such as local SA and Hitler youth officials. On that occasion, he made a fiery speech defending the Nazi Party and its program in a blend of Catholic and Teutonic slogans, ending with the battle cry of Arminius, the hero of the Pan-Germans and Aryan mystics, in the Teutoburg forest. German unity is my strength is German might. It was Arminius who was the inspiration for Guido von List Arminianschaft, the cult that List formed to worship Wotan and to instigate a return to the old pagan ways of the ancient Teutons. For Alois Hudal to invoke Arminius at this gathering in Rome was tantamount to aligning himself with the neo-pagan, pan-German Volkisch movement represented by List, Lebenfels, and Rudi Sabatendorf. He didn't say Rudy, but I did.
I guess you did. To us, he's Rudy.
This strange little man then went on to publish The Foundations of National Socialism, in which he outlined and defended the Nazi Party programs, including the exclusion of Jews in no uncertain terms. Soon his efforts in combating Marxism, a legacy of his friendship with the future Pope Pius XII, Eugenio Pacelli, which dated from 1924, became widely known as the Action Hudal in Nazi circles. Well, let's see. Archbishop Ivan Buchko of the Ukraine, who managed the incredible escape of the entire Ukrainian Waffen-SS division of 11,000 men plus their families to North and South America and Australia. Monsignor Kronislav Draganovic, who helped the Croatian fascists escape justice, many to Argentina, and lay Catholic Gustav Selmans of the Nazi Latvian organization Perkenkrust and leader of the Latvian SS, who became an important member of the notoriously anti-communist Intermarium Society of the Roman Catholic Church, which in addition to helping Nazi war criminals escape justice, also served as an arm of German intelligence. Hudal was greatly admired in Nazi circles, and every effort was made to cooperate with his underground network of spies and collaborators, even as official Nazi policy remained stridently anti-clerical. Well, they remained anti-clerical in secret, but they were working hand in hand with the Roman Catholic Church, and it's just pointed out over and over again. There's tons of, documentation to that effect. Intermarium itself is interesting, not least because of its goals. One of its goals was the establishment of a new Holy Roman Empire of Eastern European nations encircling the atheistic Soviet Union. Intermarium developed a close working relationship with Alfred Rosenberg, who was not only a Nazi's chief pagan ideologue, but also a Baltic native who was tremendously sympathetic to anti-Soviet causes of any kind. After the war, many Intermarium notables became involved with the CIA and other Western intelligence services. Well, that's a real surprise. On Intermarium agenda was the formation of an exile army of anti-communists, many of whom would be former Nazis, to defend Europe's borders against the Soviet Union, and eventually to partition the USSR into small, separate ethnic enclaves, a la the Alfred Rosenberg and Heinrich Himmler plans. Well, I think they pulled that one off. They managed to break the Soviet Union down into small, separate ethnic enclaves and separate states. This involved dividing and conquering the Soviet state and thus eradicating the, quote, cancer of communism, while ensuring that the Russians would never again consolidate their power and threaten the world. Intermarium, like Hudal's Caritas Internationalists, was to provide escape routes and rat lines for fleeing Nazis for many years, supplying the necessary passports and travel documents, as well as steamship fares to ports all over the world. One wonders how today's Roman Catholics would feel about their Sunday donations, widows' mites, Peter's pence, and other charitable contributions being used to help finance the survival of Heinrich Himmler's Black Order. Some of the beneficiaries of Hudal's operation, which was being run by Cardinal Montini, the future Pope Paul VI, in his capacity as Vatican Secretary of State, include Heinrich Müller, the Gestapo chief who once debriefed astrologer William Wolff, Walter Ralph, who was in charge of the mobile gas vans in which thousands of Jews were murdered, and alleges Farrago and many other European officials, Hitler's second in command, Martin Bormann himself. Muller disappeared at war's end and followed the rat line to Argentina along with Eichmann, Mengele, and so many others. Comforted in exile with a suitcase full of American dollars, Ralph turned up in Chile. Bormann, according to Farrago, did them all one better and arrived in Buenos Aires dressed as a Catholic priest, a Jesuit. And what must be one of the most sickening scenes to any believing Catholic is that Bormann, as Father Augustine, celebrating Mass at the Cathedral of San Juan de Dios in La Paz, Bolivia, where he escaped when Argentina became too hot. Klaus Barbie would find a safe house with another Nazi priest living in Bolivia, in this case a Croat war criminal. We've talked about that before. He also, this is Bormann, he also performed weddings, baptisms, and other sacraments while serving in the role of auxiliary priest. This, of course, is the ultimate blasphemy. The most wanted war criminal in the world, a devoted Nazi since the 1920s, special assistant to pagan mystic Rudolf Hess, and third in line for leadership of the Reich after Hitler, Göring, a man whose womanizing was excused by his wife, because by fathering children out of wedlock, he was only doing his sacred duty to the fatherland. This man, with the blood of millions on his hands, celebrating Mass and dispensing Holy Communion to the faithful in the fiercely Catholic country of Bolivia. Well, I don't know what to say after that. Except
what a network.
Yeah. I guess we should point out on this day the celebration of Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess of fertility, which the Roman Catholic Church has instituted as celebration of the resurrection of Christ, a little counterfeit celebration, just like Christmas. You know, I'm reading this by Lavenda, but it doesn't surprise me that the Roman Catholic Church allowed these things to happen.
Well, I want to ask you, too, I'm not trying to save myself from getting all kinds of brickbats thrown at me. But, you know, see, here's where I have the problem. Is it the church? What do we mean by the church? Because to me, the Vatican is secular. I know that they have this, you know, the show big. I understand. Oh, the Vatican. What are you talking about? Well, it's a nation state. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, that's true.
And since, if you would say, the Jesuitical takeover in the 1820s, they were a tough bunch of people to begin with, going back to like 1000 A.D. But they needed some help, and it was provided by the Jesuits. And from that time, they've done pretty well for themselves. However, as much as see, I don't think the laity knows what's going on, but the clergy in some places, especially the high-level ones, like for instance, it's because it's the first time I heard it, but it's true that they called Vietnam Spelly's War, Spellman's War. Spellman was a heavy-duty shaker and mover.
Yeah.
I don't know that the likes of him have come that way again, but usually whatever cardinal presides in St. Patrick's is the one that's the chief of all the network in the United States. So I don't know. You see, I shy away from saying the church in a sense, only because I don't think the laity knows what's going on.
Yeah, well, it may be unfair. It's not really intended to be unfair, but it may be unfair to say the Roman Catholic Church, if we include the Roman Catholic Church to mean, you know, the majority of the believers, the people that show up on the pews on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, I mean, they may.
And no, I don't think those people are in any form, you know, involved with the type of things we're talking about. We should say the Vatican, and even at that, I don't think everybody in the Vatican was, you know, that is included in the Vatican was involved in these things either.
No, but I'll say this. I mean, Roman Catholic believers would not be happy hearing this, and they would defend the Vatican and all that other. I understand that.
Yeah, I don't doubt they would, but I don't see how they can. I really don't.
But they don't know. They don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
But I mean, there's so much evidence. I mean, there's so many people have done research on it. Some of these things are just. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church, or let's say the Vatican again, was involved with bringing fascism and Nazism into power with the Lateran Treaty and the Concordat in the 1920s and 30s.
Hey, listen, they had their shadow cast over the United States in the Civil War.
Yeah.
Right? And Cardinal Antonelli, I had asked Wilcox once about Cardinal Antonelli. I said, you know, was he here? He said, no, he was in the Vatican, but he was looked at perhaps as being, you can almost say, like the Vatican's man in the United States.
Right.
And that's when Charles went back into that chroniclingamerica.loc.gov site, and you can find articles in major dailies in the United States that will tell you of this problem that has been completely sanitized from our history books.
Right.
It's the reason why did John Surratt, who escaped a prosecution for the assassination of Lincoln, wind up in the Vatican Guard? I mean,
right.
It gets a little weird.
Well, I'll tell you one very brave journalist, and it crushed his career.
Seldes?
It was Seldes.
Yes.
George Seldes tried, even way back in the days, even before the Spanish Civil War, but especially in the Spanish Civil War, he tried to point out how the Roman Catholic Church was the driving force behind bringing Mussolini and Hitler's troops into Spain to support Franco and their rebellion against what had been a legally elected government. But the problem was that the Republic, the anarchists, the socialists, and especially the communists, it was kind of a mixture of different people or different groups on the left. The problem with them was that there was a group of them, I think probably the communists, maybe the anarchists too, had gone around and persecuted the Roman Catholic Church once they took over, sort of a revenge factor, because the Roman Catholic Church and the priest had been so in bed, not literally, hopefully, but they were in bed with the aristocracy there in Spain, and they saw them as being part of the oppression of the upper class, and quite a few of them were killed.
Yeah.
And so the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, gosh, I keep saying it. Sorry.
No,
the Vatican got really upset, obviously, and did everything they could to arrange a situation where Mussolini and Hitler's troops were brought in to put an end to the Spanish Republic. And it was basically what Seldes called an address rehearsal for World War II.
Yeah.
And he kept trying to tell the American public that they weren't getting the truth about it, that the Vatican was setting the whole thing up.
I don't want you to be self-conscious about that in a sense. I mean, if you feel it's justified, okay.
Yeah.
If not, because, I had Darryl, what's-his-face on. Oh, I can't remember. And he went back and forth. I'm like, look, you're not doing that. And I mean that. But, It made me acutely aware of, like, okay, what do you want to talk about? If you want to talk about Roman Catholic beliefs, okay, we can do that. I'm not cool with them. Neither am I cool with a lot of Protestant ones. Or are we looking at the political...
Well, I just don't want people to think that I'm some kind of Catholic basher, hate Catholics. I don't. I'm just not like that. And I realize that the majority... It's just like the people in the Masons, in Freemasonry. The majority of the Freemasons are just guys who are trying to further their careers and have friendship with people in the business community, et cetera.
It's cheap beer, too.
Yeah. But they're not involved with,
no, they're not.
Any kind of weirdness at the top.
No. And I got sensitive to this only because, it's got nothing to do with my uncle, who's a third degree, never got out of the Blue Lodge. It doesn't have anything to do with that. But the occult symbolism that has found its way into some of the higher degrees of Freemasonry is not begotten. It was not created by the Freemasons. This goes back millennia.
Egypt and Babylon.
So, don't say it's Masonic. I say it's a cult. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And I think, Liam had made the point once upon a time. And that's when I started getting suspicion. No, I'm coughing. You gave it to me.
Contagion over the phone.
There you go. What else? Put your hands on the mic. No.
Feel the power.
Say yes.
That's not the power. You're standing in a bucket of water.
That is true.
Anyway.
I keep thinking of Robin Williams, and I'm thinking about his line that he said about, I guess, some evangelist, but I think of Trump now who's going to run for office, or he's popping off, right? And I keep thinking of Robin Williams going, "What's that raccoon on your head?" Yeah, come on, Donald, you can't run for office with that thing. I'd like to see Sarah Palin come up behind him and give him a fetch upside the head, banging all the hair. It's one of those things. It's like if he sneezes, he'll flog himself because it's all in the front. I'm horrible. This is terrible. You don't have to listen to this, folks. You can leave right now.
Oh, man.
Yeah, where we were going with this, I don't know.
Well, we were just talking about the difference
right.
between talking about the Roman Catholic Church and talking about the Vatican.
I'm not cool with their religious tenets. That's another whole story. That's another whole show, and that's fine. But when you take a look at it, honestly, like you said today, how many times do Christians really care about going to church? Usually, if they want to keep some nominal presence, they go Christmas, they go Easter. One of the things that we never asked, I didn't even ask a couple of years ago. It's like, well, let me get something straight. You have a birth date and a death date. They don't float. They happen on certain dates. And Easter, which we celebrate the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, is all over the joint. And it's like, how can that be? He died on a day. He was resurrected 3 days later. That happened and didn't float between March, 21st or 17th, whatever it is. Oh, that's St. Patty's Day. And then goes over to as late as now. And I'll be honest with you, I'm trying to think hard about when I ever saw Easter this late. I guess it was. But, man.
I felt the same way. And somebody tried to explain to me how they determine what day Easter is each year. And that was many years ago, and I don't remember how it works. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, it's got something to do with the vernal equinox. And
it's all about the fertility rites, and it was just the Roman Catholic Church, which is led by the Vatican.
But it was Constantine that did it.
Yeah, they decided to incorporate that into their state version of Christianity. It was a festival that the people knew about and were familiar with, and they decided to go ahead and incorporate that. Could you wait just a second, Biz? I've got something I'll read for you.
Sure.
This is several different sources. Langdon tells us, and this is S.H. Langdon in his book, Semitic Mythology, this is a comment on it. Langdon tells us that Mary worship came from ancient Babylon, where the Virgin Mother Goddess was worshipped under the name Ishtar. Elsewhere in the Near East, the Mother Goddess was called Astarte, Ashtoreth, Persephone, Artemis, or Diana of Ephesus, Venus, and Isis. This goddess, considered to be the greater than any god, with little g, was called by the heathen the Virgin Mother, Merciful Mother, Queen of Heaven, and My Lady, which is what Madonna means in Italian. Langdon says she was often sculptured in mother and infant imagery, or as a Mater Dolorum, sorrowful mother, interceding for men with a wrathful God, and thus ancient paganism was brought into the churches and lives of Christians. Got some other things here. During the Reformation, all the great Protestant leaders identified the Roman Catholic Church with Babylonian mystery religion. Rome had been equated with a harlot since the early church. The woman in John's vision had been symbolically equated to Rome ever since the 5th century. This is verified by St. Jerome, who lived from 347 to 420 A.D., one of the most noted scholars of the period, who translated the Bible into Latin. Hastings states, the identification of Babylon with Rome dates at least from the time of St. Jerome, page 84, Dictionary of the Bible by James Hastings. And then we go into what the Roman Catholic priesthood has said, in particular Cardinal Newman in his book, The Development of the Christian Religion by Cardinal Newman. Cardinal Newman admits in his book that the temples, incense, oil lamps, votive offerings, holy water, holidays, and season of devotions, processions, blessings of the fields, sacerdotal vestments, the tonsure of priests and monks and nuns, images and statues are all of pagan origin. Then Cardinal Gibbons says in his book, Faith of Our Fathers, the penetration of the religion of Babylon became so general and well known that Rome was called the New Babylon. And then in The Rise of the Medieval Church by A.C. Flick, the mighty Catholic Church was little more than the Roman Empire baptized. And then again from Langdon, from ancient Babylon came the cult of the Virgin Mother Goddess, who was worshipped as the highest of the gods. Then from Will Durant, in The Age of Faith, the belief in miracle-working objects, talismans, amulets, and formulas was dear to Christianity, and they were received from pagan antiquity. The vestments of the clergy and the papal title of Pontifex Maximus were legacies from pagan Rome. The Catholic Church found that rural converts still revered certain springs, wells, trees, and stones. She thought it wiser to bless these to Christian use than to break too sharply with the traditions of sentiment. Pagan festivals dear to the people reappeared as Christian feasts, and pagan rites were transformed into Christian liturgy. The Christian calendar of saints replaced the Roman fasti, or pantheon of gods. Ancient divinities dear to the people were allowed to revive on the names of Christian saints. Gradually, the tenderest features of Astartes, Cybele, Artemis, Diana, and Isis will gather together in the worship of Mary. And this is from the title of Pontifex Maximus by Mark Bonacore. One of the most amazing aspects about the ascendancy of the papacy is that the Church of Rome promotes the Pope as the Pontifex Maximus, or Supreme Pontiff. The title Pontifex Maximus is mentioned numerous times by the early Church Fathers, particularly by Tertullian, but it was not applied to a Christian bishop. The early Church Fathers say that the Pontifex Maximus was the king of heathendom, the evil high priest of the pagan mysteries of Rome. It is certainly not likely that Christ appointed Peter Pontifex Maximus of Rome. And then I can go on to say, this is some stuff I wrote from my research. Pontifex Maximus was an imperial office usually held by the emperor himself, which made one the chief priest of the Roman state cult. This state cult was a paganism and emperor worship. Understanding this concept makes it easier to understand the reasons why the Vatican and the Jesuits, along with the powers of corporate finance and industry, were the principal promoters of fascism in Italy, Germany, and Spain. The Roman Church hierarchy despised liberal democracy, socialism, communism, and any other system which would interfere with their power and accumulation of wealth. They greatly feared communism since, as an atheistic system, it sought to destroy organized religion. Although the Vatican had no love for the Orthodox Church of Russia, it eyed the ruthless persecution and confiscation of the property of the Church with alarm. The Romanists were not going to allow that fate to come to them. Just something I wrote in one of my articles.
All right. If I can I close with something?
Sure.
All right. Now, this is from the book A History of Rome.
Okay.
By Carey and Scullard. And I just found this interesting about Constantine. It said, and I'm just going to pick this up, it said, thus Constantine's attitude to the church is unambiguous, but the true nature of his, quote, conversion remains as enigmatic as his character. He has been depicted at one extreme as religiously committed to Christ, and at the other as merely using Christianity as an instrument in a policy of self-aggrandizement. The truth probably lies somewhere between. And a lot of this, there's a lot of maybe if Constantine's conversion really is on thin ice. And in the last paragraph of this one section called Economic, Cultural, and Religious Developments, again in this book called The History of Rome, it states, in the days of Constantine, Christianity was still a long way from being the universal religion of the Roman Empire. Except perhaps in Syria and Asia Minor and in the city of Alexandria, its adherents nowhere included more than half the population. In Rome and the West, they were as yet a small minority. Yet they had planted their propaganda cells in every province. Their clergy had constituted itself into a powerful, here we go, aristocracy. Above all, they had captured a high proportion of the more thoughtful inhabitants of the empire. And lastly, in the middle of the 4th century, the reluctant but honest emperor Julian, who Robert Denton is a fan of his, and apparently for good reason. He said, the reluctant but honest Emperor Julian, the last eminent champion of the older order of things, was constrained to admit that the ultimate victory of Christianity in the Roman world was assured, but the point is, what Christianity was the victor? If you have a religion, why do you name it after the state?
Right.
And yet, earlier in that book, it also talks about the religion being incorporated. Interesting words that years ago you and I and many of us would have overlooked. But now when we hear incorporation, now it means something else, doesn't it, with the 501c3 with us to this day. Okay. All right. Are we all right with all that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We are, as we said, Larry added a little something new to the beginning of this, but this was the reprise of the long lost part 4, part of We Are What We Hated. So we're going to get that out, but it's going to be followed again in regular numerical order. And when we go back now, we're going to be looking, I think, next time we do something new, because we haven't hit 6 yet. What are you going to open up 7 with?
I'd like to talk about the influence of the Nazis in the Middle East and how that relates to what's going on today, especially in Egypt and in North Africa, and how that is related to we are what we hated.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming on again, and also not to be generous with your time, but we're going to go until it's over, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
And whatever the parts mean, the parts mean.
Yeah.
Ominous Parallels is finished. If you need to take another look at what was going on at this period, especially as it pertains to the beginning of World War II and how we have turned into the road to Weimar, you can see that through Ominous Parallels, and you have this as well to go through this situation, which I think Larry and I and others feel is accurate, and that we are becoming, I guess, a Nazified country. We don't like to hear that. We're not talking about it in terms of anti-Semitism. I think, and I'm going to give you the last word on this, when I think about this, I'm talking about a mean-spirited country, more militant and aggressive in thinking. Not even going to play, the anti-Semite card. I don't think that's part of this one. I don't think so. But turning a population mean and then turning that loose on the supposed enemy. And I'll leave it at that. And Larry, what's your call about our brand of Nazism?
Well, I don't think our brand of Nazism is really all that anti-Semitic, especially when you consider one of the most important elements of the far right in America is the quote, and I use this loosely, evangelical community, because that is a very pro-Zionist community and very, very pro-Jewish, very pro-Zionist. But I think we've got plenty of other people to pick on, minorities that we can hate in America. I mean, black people know that for a fact. I mean, that's been going on for an awful long time. There's plenty of minorities, and you've also got coming up with the Hispanics, and especially with unrestricted immigration coming across our borders. That's another, a group that can be used as a scapegoat. So I don't think there's any shortage. And of course, there's always going to be, the hardcore, old-style Nazi anti-Semitism going on. There are always people that hate Jews. They'll always be around. And, I think that with the conditions, every time that you've seen a movement, an extreme right movement, take over, say, in Europe or in other countries in the world, it always seems to follow on the heels of a very extreme economic, stressful situation, a depression. Sure. Where people are out of work, and this is when people start to turn on, the whole system itself, and they develop a scapegoat. And I think that immigration is going to be a much bigger issue in the future. I know that the people out in along the border, especially in Arizona and New Mexico, it's a Minutemen. I can't remember.
It was originally.
Yeah, yeah. They're an extreme right group, and they're very well armed, and they are pretty radical in their viewpoints, and they're going to gain adherents. They're going to recruit, and there's already a very strong neo-Nazi movement in this country that maybe a lot of people are not aware of, but it's not just a bunch of punk kids, who scalp their heads. There are people behind them, and there's money behind them. And I think when you look at the Tea Party, when you look at people like the Koch brothers, KOCH, the Koch brothers, the big industrialist financial machine that they are, and it's always they always have corporate sponsors for these things. That's the way it worked in Germany. Hitler didn't have any money. The Nazi Party didn't have any money when they started off.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, they had to get that money from somewhere, and it's all documented how they got it, and a lot of it came from America, unfortunately. So there's always that element here, and we've got them now instead of Averill Harriman and Prescott Bush and that gang. Now we've got the Koch brothers, you know. So, and I'm sure there are others, you know. In the old days, H.L. Hunt was always behind far right causes in this country, and his foundation and the people that have come behind him may still be in that too. I haven't really investigated it.
Well, you got to love the fact that he cornered silver like he did too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What a guy! I own
he
Costa
was a
Rica.
trip, man.
Oh yeah.
That was a guy. That was a guy who shot from the lip. I mean, he would say things that, you know, were astounding, but a lot of people just weren't listening to what he was saying. But you know, he was pretty much just calling his shots.
Yeah.
And he didn't care who heard it because he had so much money, nobody could do anything to him.
But it's true, and I mean, he's a figure that's kind of like it's kind of been forgotten about.
Yeah.
But
dangerous guy.
Yeah, and I think if you go to YouTube, there is something about him, and it's kind of interesting.
There are a lot of people that believe he was very much involved with the assassination of John Kennedy, and you know, there's a lot of evidence that points to that. There's another Dallas millionaire who was involved with the mob and was very right-wing in a lot of ways, and that's Clint Murchison, who used to be the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. And
I knew I didn't like that team for a reason.
Yeah. I knew you'd like that.
What about them boys? Screw
for all
you.
my fellow Texans out there.
Yeah. Well, what I like about you is that at least you were an AFL guy and stuck
with
the Oilers.
I was always a Houston Oilers fan, man. I never liked the Dallas Cowboys, but, you know, hey, that's the way it goes.
All right. Well, yeah, we've gone 2 hours here, and again, thanks for coming on. And there's some things that you said, but I gave you the last word, and that's the way it should be. But already dangerous cogs are turning in my brain, all three of them. And I'll have at you next time around.
Okay. Well, you know, a great deal of what I say on this show is, you know, just is opinion based upon what I've seen, and, you know, trying to interpret the facts and put them into some kind of order. But a lot of times I can't make all the connections, you know. There's so much stuff going on.
Well, when the emails come in, I'm sending them to you, so that's all right. All right, bro.
Just don't send me the brown shirts, okay?
Oh, no, these are the brown pants. I'll see you.
No. I'm not going to touch that line.
And you shouldn't, because that's exactly where I'm going. Bye.
All right, see you later.